an awful lot of change is coming through in terms of business support with a new government, new focus, new priorities. But what should commissioners think about when developing programme support for SME businesses?
Do you mind if I start, Martin? I've got a hobby horse on this, a personal hobby horse, and a few open wounds on this one, David, which is one word: proportionate. And I think at the moment, certainly with the way that UK SPF funding has been governed and let, is that we have at the moment, in certain aspects, programmes where there isn't proportionate resources to the outcomes that are being asked. Now that has a direct correlation on what we can deliver. And if that is out of kilter, the quality of what is delivered is hampered. So in simplistic terms, if the funding and the outcomes are misaligned, what you tend to find is either you have a programme which is very light touch and doesn't have the impact to actually shift the organisations on, or in fact you can't deliver what's being asked because there's not enough resource to build a team to deliver the intensity of support that's being required. Where the proportionate nature of the commissioner to the outcomes is in kilter, you have a successful programme because you can build an effective team with the right amount of man hours in that team at the right experience levels and the right skill sets with the right tools being delivered to the right number of SMEs and over a portion of time, which means you can actually make a difference. So what I would say, and it's a plea to commissioners, is try and find the proportionate amount of funding to outcomes in your new bids that you let, your new tenders, and you will have an excellent business support programme.
And presumably leading on from that, there's something about timeframes and timelines. Obviously a lot of public funding tends to look in terms of financial years from 5th of April. Businesses don't think like that. So any views on that sort of flexibility on time?
Timeframes has always been a challenge in business support. You know, it's a well-versed marketplace now, SME business support. We've worked in it for 20, 25 years, and there's still fundamentals that don't change, David. And one of them is short-termism. So funders, even progressive funders, they want to do things, but they look at it and they align their funding with the funding streams that they can play with. Hopefully it's 3 years, but we've had to deal with much less than that with UK SPF, which has posed massive challenges for us in terms of mobilising, building teams, starting delivery, getting traction. Before you know it, we're coming towards the end of the funding cycles. Now the problem with that is it's a very expensive way of doing business support, because unless you can actually get extensions and continue doing that over a longer period of time, is that these teams get dismantled, and then guess what? 3 months later, you're out building them again. It's an extremely expensive way of doing business support. You don't get momentum, you don't get economic development momentum, and therefore actually UK PLC is hampered by it. So longevity of funding streams and therefore longevity of business support programmes is absolutely crucial.
I think this builds on one of the things we spoke about earlier on around what makes a successful business support programme. We talked about the relationship between the funder and delivery agents or companies like ours is of paramount importance, and understanding what next will help us to work with our teams and plan for the future. And what we don't understand, being on the other side of the fence, the delivery side of the fence, as opposed to the policy and creation of these programmes, is the drivers and pressure that local government or combined authorities, district councils or whatever are faced with. We don't understand the rushes or the pressures that may be put on them based upon some money that's given to them or not given to them as promised. And so I would have thought that in time with the new government there will be new funding mechanisms and new funding policies and so on, which will allow people to make longer term decisions around business support, which will help them, help us, help SMEs. But ultimately, David, your question was around what should commissioners look for in the design of these programmes. And ultimately, what I see in terms of what they should be looking for is some stuff that we don't understand so much around the macroeconomics side of things. But ultimately, what are the needs of their local economy? What are the needs of their local SME base? And being able to design and configure or conceive ideas around things that will help them to make improvements. What are the pain points they have within their local economy? What are the pain points that are faced by SMEs in terms of, is there a proportion of companies are all faced with the same types of problems or issues or opportunities they can exploit? What are the opportunities funders have to enhance their local economy and help their economy grow? What are the opportunities for SMEs to make improvements? And all the answers to a lot of those questions would help to design and configure programs. But also, David, you spoke about the data that we have, and I believe the diagnostic tools that we have, that we are using, that we've helped to design and create and so on and use now, there's no organisations out there that have the amount of data that we have, particularly around growth and around productivity.
So James, just picking up on something you said earlier about proportionality.
Yes.
We all recognise, operating in this space, that this is taxpayers' money, and therefore there's an accountability, transparency in terms of taxpayers' money. But equally, there's sometimes challenges around KPIs, outcomes, and measures that commissioners need to work with to demonstrate that value for money and return on investment. So just interested in terms of again, what would good look like in terms of commissioning of programs that satisfies that transparency, but is very much focused on value adding to the program and being proportionate?
That's a really good question. I think ultimately we mustn't lose sight of a couple of things here. The first thing is we are dealing with people. So when funders, and we fully understand there are commercials with what they're trying to do in terms of utilising taxpayers' money for a return on investment in terms of economic development. We get that. That's the bread and butter of what we do. But in terms of measuring success, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So the traditional KPIs that we've lived and breathed, certainly through ERDF, the 12-hour assists, etc., were extremely restrictive. Because ultimately, as we've discussed so far, is what we're trying to do with any of our customer journeys in our programs is bespoke and tailor it to the needs of that particular SME. So what we try and do is actually collect a number of milestone data points through all of our programs. It's not just about the key program milestones of businesses assisted or a grant distributed or a job created or safeguarded. All important, but only tells part of the picture. So we try to look at what the actual impact of our support has been on the individual in the company. So we have a raft of case studies which are tailored to the individual involved in that tells a story for the funders. They can actually see in person, by reading that case study, what the impact has been on the individuals that have been on our programme. That's really important. We also run customer satisfaction points all the way through our customer journey, which asks a number of questions about ease of access, what they thought the diagnostics that Martin articulated earlier, the overall satisfaction. Would they recommend this programme to peers, which is always the acid test in whether we've actually been successful or not. So yes, programme KPIs are here to stay. I'm sure they won't disappear. Maybe we can refine them, but they'll always be here. But what we also try to do is layer on other data points and activities that hopefully demonstrate the quality of the interventions that we have with the SMEs.
Many years ago, someone within the other side of the fence who was actually responsible for commissioning these programs spoke to me about how could we change the types of measures that we report on these business support programs. And he did make me think. I didn't quite understand where he was coming from, but I think I do now, literally 2 or 3 years, even 4 or 5 years later on. So you've just been talking about all the traditional measures, outcomes, outputs of these programs. And those outcomes, outputs drive the behaviours of delivery organisations. Is this a business assist, which is 2 hours or 12 hours or whatever? Is it a job created, a job safeguarded? Is it helping a company to export more? Is it helping them to do something else? And I think what we have on the productivity programme is rather quite unique because what we're measured on in terms of our ultimate outcome is a number of productivity improvement plans that we've got to develop with a company, or with companies rather. But ultimately what we do with those companies is we understand an area within the business where we will gain a baseline level of productivity. And we will help them to put a plan together which will make improvements to that area within their business. So over the course of literally 40 or 50 hours of support that we provide them with, we'll have a baseline level of productivity, and 6 to 12 months later, a level of productivity which we can compare against. And what it is showing, and what we hope it will continue to show, is that companies are making improvements in levels of productivity, which is what this program is meant to do. And I think the point that the funder, my contact within the funding organisation, was making is, how can we change the types of outcomes and outputs to reflect where we are really helping companies to improve. And so what we're challenging ourselves on now is, within productivity, we've got 12 productivity improvement indicators that we can apply to organisations and our clients and engage, let's say, baseline and future levels of productivity. And we're thinking now about how we can do that around growth, where we can actually show that the programme of support that we're delivering to SMEs is delivering demonstrable improvements. Not just that we've supported them for 12 hours, tick a box, not that we're just helping to create a job, but that job was also created by 5 other programs that we're working with. The support that we actually provide adds value and can be demonstrably can demonstrate can demonstrate that we've made improvements.
But that's a really good point, because what it also does is, what's amazing, David, about this is that the granular understanding of a lot of funding authorities of SMEs in their area is actually quite limited. So what Martin's describing there, through the productivity diagnostic and also through the deployment of the growth diagnostic, is that we're gathering an awful lot of data, which is then being turned into intelligence on what the pain points are and the challenges of SMEs in particular areas for funders. So you talk about the traditional KPIs, what we're trying to do is shift that conversation on to actually, well, do you know what's going on inside your regional economy? We've got some data, we've got some intelligence here that you will find useful to both shape future business support activities moving forward and directly address the pain points that you've got going on in your regional economy. That's really valuable stuff that they haven't currently got.
Yeah, and I think that's having the foresight and insight to go over and above the contract KPIs in terms of being able to collaborate and feedback meaningfully to the funder.
Yeah, definitely.
So I totally agree.